Landry awakens from a terrifying dream in which he is covered in blood, holding a bloodied sword, and sees all his brothers slain, with no survivors. This dream leaves him uneasy, and he begins to doubt whether he has been abandoned by God. Meanwhile, the cross branded on his chest the night before still throbs with pain. In the early morning, another piece of bad news came. Draper, who was sent by the Grand Commander to find the villain, was carried back. The brother who had always been with Landry passed away unfortunately, and Landry was in great pain. Landry angrily confronts the Grand Master, demanding to know why he wasn't allowed to go with Draper.
And I'd be burying you as well.
With a heavy heart, Landry cleans Draper's body and places 2 coins on his eyes, bidding farewell to his friend. After composing himself, Landry turns his attention to training the new recruits. The training involves loosening the reins on horseback and fighting with both hands. Landry expertly dons his helmet, wielding a sword in one hand and a shield in the other. He swiftly maneuvers around a dummy and returns to his starting position, impressing the new recruits. However, when it's the new recruit's turn, chaos ensues. One recruit falls off his horse while attempting a turn. The Grand Master is displeased, as they are expecting the new recruits to fight against seasoned villains in the forest. Landry negotiated with the captain, thinking that it was too dangerous to let the new recruits fight against experienced villains. But the captain insisted that the new recruits were knights on the first day they joined the knights and should be ready to fight at any time. So, Landry decided to play the enemy to test whether the recruits were capable of going to the battlefield. The Grand Master agrees but stipulates that Landry must fight on foot. Landry effortlessly dodges the attacks of the mounted recruits, even dismounting one of them. When a second recruit attacks, Landry handles him with ease. The third recruit has his horse taken by Landry, who then approaches the Grand Master, asserting that the recruits are not yet ready for battle. The Grand Master responds that anyone who dies in the service of gods will die an honorable death. Landry took this to heart. At dinner, when new recruits asked him about his former training experiences, Landry changed his helpful demeanor and didn't say a word. The leader of the new recruits informed the new recruits that the Grand Master had declared war on the forest villains, and that the new recruits would join the Knights Templar to fight. After the Grand Master leaves, the recruits are filled with anxiety, fearing they might meet the same fate as their fallen brothers. Landry simply tells them that they are adults and must face their own fears. He then leaves the table. That night, instead of going to bed, Landry visits Tancred. Tancred informs him that the villain's hideout has been located, and the Knights Templar will launch an attack at dawn. Landry, unusually calm, thanks Tancred for taking care of his daughter Eve and for his unwavering trust. Tancred is puzzled by Landry's demeanor, but the two embrace. After the others fall asleep, Landry quietly gets up, retrieves weapons from the armory, and takes a horse. He glances at the sanctuary before leading through a secret passage. Unbeknownst to him, a wakeful new recruit witnesses his departure. Meanwhile, in the Paris palace, William brings Gawain to meet King Philip. Prince Louis is intrigued by Gawain, but the king is displeased that Gawain does not kneel before him, due to a leg injury. Gawain was introduced to the king by William, so William felt embarrassed when he saw the scene. He asked Gawain why he didn't behave well in front of the king, but Gawain said that he could only behave well if he had money. Gawain took the money and turned away. Prince Louis's wife, Margaret, returns to Paris and has a cordial relationship with the prince. But when she talked to Princess Isabella, she always regarded herself as the future Queen of France. Margaret kept talking about Louis becoming king, which made Isabella very unhappy. William pulled the bishop out of the bathtub. When the bishop arrived at the palace hall, King Philip was angrily smashing Joan's throne. He shattered the throne with an axe, which only heightened the bishop's fear. The king informed the bishop that the pope had passed away in his sleep, and he hoped that Bishop Raymond could succeed him. He believed it was time for a Frenchman to hold the papacy, as the Italians had dominated that position for long enough. Meanwhile, Prince Louis continued to disguise himself as a Knight Templar to capture children. He went to a house under the pretext of drinking water, and the host warmly entertained him. Louis asked about his wife and children, and the host said that his wife had gone to the market and he had no son, but the baptismal file in Louis's hand showed that he had a son, so the man had to say that his son died young. When Louis was about to leave, he found that there was something wrong with the floor, and the man's wife and children were hiding underneath. When asked where the son was buried, the husband hesitated, struggling to find a suitable answer. Lewis picked up a basin and began banging it, causing the baby to cry out in fright. The husband was killed, and Lewis seized the child. In the palace, King Philip was sparring with his son, only to lose to him. The king was not upset about losing the duel, but rather that Landry's child had yet to be found. That child was a source of shame for him. Discussing heirs, the king also expressed concern over Prince Louis's future. He stated that if Louis couldn't have an heir due to Margaret's issues, he could always find another wife. Louis, however, firmly rejected that notion, insisting that he and Margaret were truly in love. Gawain sought out a barefoot doctor, who injected him with a potion that miraculously healed his limp. With his leg healed, Gawain pledged his loyalty to Louis, swearing fealty while holding his sword and spilling his blood as a symbol of his oath. After a long night of trekking, Landry finally arrived at the bandits' hideout. He stealthily entered the cave and quietly dispatched a sleeping thug. However, upon exiting, he spotted another target but was ambushed by a bandit who slashed his shoulder. The noise of their struggle awakened the other bandits, turning his covert mission into a chaotic brawl. Despite Landry's impressive combat skills, he was outnumbered, and a woman managed to stab him in the waist. Landry turned to flee but soon returned on his white horse, armed and ready for battle. He took down 2 enemies, but then his horse was shot, causing him to fall and tumble to the ground. Overwhelmed by the bandits, Landry was powerless to defend himself. He had not intended to return alive. Facing his impending doom, he looked up at the sky, arms outstretched, ready to embrace death. Just as a bandit raised an axe to strike him, the new recruit's captain rode in on horseback, knocking the bandits aside. He then swung his axe and sword in succession, defeating the remaining foes. Landry struggled to get back on his feet, but the captain slapped him hard, accusing him of disobeying orders by leaving the shrine. Landry replied that he had no intention of returning. He wished to die there, because the team leader once said that dying like this was a glorious way to die. He felt that he had been abandoned by God. The captain then shared his story about being imprisoned for 10 years after the fall of Acre, explaining how he had once prayed for death but instead learned that God had kept him alive for a reason. He advised Landry that even in hopeless situations, he could still rely on his faith. After reflecting on this, Landry returned to the shrine, kneeling in prayer as everyone present joined him in earnest supplication. In the pouring rain, 2 men engaged in a duel, their swordplay quickly escalating into a fistfight. They wrestled in the mud as spectators on the sidelines banged their shields in support. Soon, one man lay on the ground, unable to resist, while the crowd cheered for the fight. The Grand Master then shouted, declaring that Landry had passed the final test for new recruits.
Landry de Luzon, you have passed the last initiate ritual. It is my honor to welcome you back into the Order of Solomon Temple.
Landry finally found redemption. Meanwhile, Gawain successfully joined the French King's Guard and became a military commander. However, another commander inexplicably kicked Gawain's soldier to the ground. Gawain, new to his position, would not tolerate such disrespect. He approached the commander's horse and pulled him down. The commander, enraged, drew his sword, ready to fight. But Gawain did not even draw his sword. He did not consider the other man a threat. Watching the scene, Isabella showed interest. King Philip declared that Gawain was the key to his victory. Gawain told his soldiers that while they might not be a match for the Templars one-on-one, united under the king's name, they would be invincible. The king nodded in satisfaction at Gawain's words. the Grand Master held an initiation ceremony for Landry and the other new recruits, officially welcoming them back into the Templar Order. Landry reclaimed his original clothes and equipment, and the new commander became his brother. Just then, the bells rang, and the doors of the sanctuary opened. A cavalryman wearing a mask and with a green cross on his chest entered the city. He was a leper knight from the Order of St. Lazarus, bearing the news of the Pope's assassination. The Order of St. Lazarus was composed of lepers who were fierce on the battlefield. This news sparked a heated debate among the Templars in Chartres. Landry and Tancred believed the news to be true, as they had fought alongside this leper knight in Acre. Moreover, Landry suspected that King Philip had sent someone to assassinate the Pope. The Grand Master's old subordinates, however, dismissed the news as a rumor and accused Landry of seeking personal vengeance. The Grand Master, despite the disagreements, decided to send the news of the Pope's death back to Rome but chose not to immediately report the assassination. He emphasized that the Templars must follow the Pope's instructions and await the election of a new Pope before taking any action. After the meeting, Landry caught up with Gabriel, the leper knight, whom he had known for 25 years. Gabriel was shocked to learn that the Templars would not relay the news to Rome. He couldn't believe that the once formidable Templars had become so cautious and bound by rules. Landry explained that much had changed in the past 5 years, more than in the previous 20. He also revealed that he was no longer the commander but just an ordinary Templar in Chartres. With no other choice, Gabriel decided to go to Rome himself to deliver the news. He also revealed that the man sent by the king to kill them was a former Templar with a limp. Landry realized that Gawain was now serving the French king. Meanwhile, Gawain was dispatched by the king to eliminate the Order of St. Lazarus and was preparing to leave immediately. After Gawain's departure, King Philip convened a gathering to expose the crimes of the Templars. A woman whose husband and child had been killed by Louis, disguised as a Templar, came forward to accuse the Templars. She claimed that a Templar had killed her husband in front of her and taken her child. The people present were amazed. When the woman was complaining excitedly, she accidentally found Louis sitting there. The woman excitedly pointed out Louis and said that the paladin was the man in front of her.
Yes, you, Prince.
William noticed something was wrong. To avoid being noticed by the crowd, Louis stepped forward, covered the woman's mouth and led her out of the palace. Landry, Tancred, the captain, and the 3 newcomers were responsible for escorting Gabriel back to his sanctuary. Along the way, they encountered many lepers seeking refuge near the sanctuary of the Order of St. Lazarus. Finally, they reached the sanctuary at night, where many leper knights were waiting with candles. During dinner, Gabriel kept his mask on, but Landry insisted he remove it. Gabriel was hesitant, fearing his appearance would make others uncomfortable. Eventually, he complied. Several recruits looked at him strangely. After dinner, Gabriel shared his story with Landry and Tancred. He revealed that he had a wife and children but had to leave them due to his leprosy, joining the order to find a new purpose in life. That night, as the Templars rested in the chapel, Landry gazed out the window, unable to sleep as he thought of his daughter Eve. The old commander noticed his restlessness and advised him to return to his daughter and fulfill his duties as a father. He reminded Landry that a child without parents is unfortunate and that his daughter needed him now more than ever. Landry was not just a Templar but also a father. As they spoke, the sound of bells rang outside. A leper knight went to open the door, and as soon as it opened, the royal guards rushed in, killing the knight with a spear. The chapel turned into a battlefield as the 2 sides clashed in the confined space. The Templars, with their superior combat skills, quickly gained the upper hand. Landry, Tancred, and the old commander fought fiercely, while the new recruits, though inexperienced, showed no signs of fear. One of the new recruits was cornered by an enemy but was saved by a woman. After defeating the initial wave of attackers, Landry and the others attempted to close the chapel doors. As they did, Landry saw Gawain outside. With the doors closed, the defenders caught a brief respite. Gawain, standing outside, read out the charges against the Order of St. Lazarus, accusing them of plotting rebellion against King Philip and declaring them enemies of France. He then ordered his men to ram the doors. Tancred observed that there were about 50 enemies outside, including archers. He warned that charging out would be suicidal. The old commander declared that he would rather die in battle than be captured again, having experienced 10 years of imprisonment. The archers outside shot flaming arrows through the windows, setting the chapel's banners on fire. Tancred quickly tore down the burning banners and stamped out the flames, while the others used their shields to protect themselves. Landry, seeing the oil from the lamps spilled on the floor, had an idea. Outside, the soldiers struggled to break down the doors. Gawain, growing impatient, joined the effort, and together they finally breached the entrance. As the royal guards rushed in, they found the Templars standing in a line, holding candles, creating an eerie atmosphere. Gawain sensed a trap and noticed the oil on the floor. He shouted for his men to stop, but it was too late. The Templars threw their candles onto the oil, setting the floor ablaze. The frontline soldiers were engulfed in flames, and Landry charged forward, his sword piercing through a burning enemy. The second wave of the battle began, with the Templars fighting with renewed vigor. The royal guards fell one by one as the flames spread throughout the chapel. Gabriel found himself in trouble as an enemy soldier pinned his sword with his arm. Just as Gabriel was about to be overwhelmed, a new recruit killed the attacker. Landry, his sword now coated in burning oil, charged at Gawain. The two clashed, their weapons sparking against each other. The chapel filled with smoke, making it difficult to see. Gawain swung his weapon wildly, while Landry parried his attacks. A burning beam collapsed, separating the two fighters. Seeing that the battle was lost, Gawain took the opportunity to retreat. After the battle, the leper knights gathered what they could salvage from the burned sanctuary. The new recruits, who had initially been wary of the lepers, now showed them kindness and respect. One of the new recruits even embraced a female leper as they said their goodbyes. Landry shook hands with Gabriel, and the remaining leper knights prepared to travel to Loire to seek the Grand Master's help. The Templar riders split into three, and the old headmaster went to inform the other sanctuaries to strengthen their defenses. As the war had begun, the three new recruits went back to Chartres to report back to the Grand Master about the situation on this side. Tancred takes Landry to see his daughter to prevent King Philip from finding Eve. Before leaving, the old leader told the three young men that they were already Knights Templar and hoped that they would fight for justice and kill the unjust. Back at the palace in Paris, Gawain burst into the king's chamber, startling Isabella. King Philip demanded to know what had happened.
What's happened? Landry,